Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I do want to remind people that this episode is brought to you by my friend Preston Poulter's book, Palace of the Golden Princess, which offers a fun, sexy romp through a fantasy RPG setting run by women. Issue 3 is actually live now on Kickstarter. And right now, people could actually sign up for Preston's email at pocketjackcomics.com and get a free copy of issue 1 in PDF form so you can try it before you buy it and see if you like the series, as well as it is brought to you by my friend JD Rosario's Limbo. So check out Limbo, open almost all of Eternity 1 and 2, where you will find demons, breasts, booze, hell freezing over, and not safe for work covers. A comic book too naughty not to be nice. But enough about those guys, because I have with me comic creator, I think for the third, maybe the fourth time, Rob Multari. So
Yeah,
welcome back to the show.
hey, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's third or fourth for sure. Something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to have you on. Obviously, we talk about Nightwolf, we talk about Snowpaw, we talk about some other stuff. And I know you are currently in the middle of your latest Kickstarter, which is something kind of in the Nightwolf vein and Snowpaw vein, but that is Wolfpack Pups, a Halloween trick-or-treat tale book and plushie. So before we get too deep into this book, kind of let's catch everybody up on what this book is, what it is not, for those who are hearing about it for the first time.
Yeah, so basically, the Wolfpack Pups is planned to be a children's book series based on kind of like child versions of Nightwolf and Snowpaw. And basically, it's, kind of get the younger readers involved in, something for like my daughter who is 5. We enjoy reading bedtime stories. And this was something, like the theme of the book was kind of like something that we went through last year in preschool about her being jealous of her best friend having other friends and playing with them. So the moral of the story basically is that, you can have other friends. You don't just have to be stuck with one friend. Don't be jealous. And, because it's a werewolf pups, we thought a Halloween theme would be great because we have witches involved as well. So, so basically it's a kid's board book for the Halloween people who enjoy Halloween, who enjoy cuddly werewolf pups and cute twin witches.
Yeah, let's actually dive into this a little bit, because there's a lot of stuff going on with this book. It's not necessarily in the book, but the wider universe per se. But obviously, I mean, it does focus on Nightwolf and Snowpaw, who are going trick or treating, from my understanding.
Yes.
And obviously, they are young werewolf pups, and kind of on Halloween, I think they feel safe to be themselves to some degree.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So it's Halloween. They feel like they can go out in their werewolf forms without scaring anybody. And, their favorite time of year because they, otherwise have to be, in their human forms. And this kind of lets them get a chance to run wild.
And so obviously you have that going on, and you have their relationship, and then you have their classmates that are kind of up to no good, who are being very difficult. And that's kind of where this whole thing gets super interesting, where, not to ruin too much, but I think they turn Nightwolf into a voodoo doll plush toy. And this is where the whole thing gets kind of interesting, and then it becomes an adventure, and then it becomes the restoration story, and it's kind of all of that. And so what is that like? Because it also ties now into the plushie side of things. And that's where this is so interesting, is that you're marketing a product in a book, but you don't necessarily need the product to understand the book.
Right. Yeah. So it was like, so we did the plushie a couple months ago, I think back in February. And so that campaign funded, and we had the plushies. Originally was based off of a pinup that was in the Nightwolf Volume 1 trade paperback. And so that we did the plushie. People loved it. So we thought, hey, why not, since we're going to be working on this Wolfpack Pups story, why not get like kind of an origin story for this plushie? Because it doesn't actually like necessarily live within the actual comic realm. So that kind of like between the jealousy theme and this being was kind of the catalyst to put the whole story together. So it was like, it wasn't even that hard to like kind of put the timeline together and everything. And, with the twin witches, getting involved. Janelle is the jealous one, who is very jealous of the pups and like their friendship. So she wants to have Nightwolf, all to herself. And then there's her sister, Cersei, who's basically just loves to cause trouble and mischief. She's just there to make chaos. And so that's kind of like where that all goes. And for them, it was, just another, just a trick. Instead of having treats, they wanted to do tricks.
And then obviously this is the whole thing of getting Nightwolf back to being normal, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so basically when I, the previews that I have on the Kickstarter leaves you at basically what happens. And now what happens after that is, up to the readers to figure out once they get the books. But in general, yes, it's now how does Snowpaw recover from what just happened and figure out how to get the witches to turn Nightwolf back, and see how this comes up in a kind of a child-friendly manner.
Yeah, let's actually talk about this, because I don't want to ruin too much of the book, because I actually think there's a larger discussion here to be had, where this is a children's book. It's not necessarily a comic. It's comic adjacent, I think, where I don't consider this a graphic novel. I consider this a children's book.
Yes.
If that makes any sense. And that's not an insult. It obviously is rooted in comics. It has a comic theme. It's cousins to comics. But what is that like? Because there's certain things you could do in a comic that you can't do in a picture book or a children's book or a young reader's book. And there's things that you could do in a young reader's book that you can't do in a comic book. And what is that like? Because that's a big transition.
It is. It was kind of tough. I think I struggled with.
You can't drop a few F-bombs. It'd be very bad. It'd be very bad.
Yeah,
5-year-old.
Definitely drop the F-bombs.
And it's not friend, guys. It's not friend, and it's not fun. Those are perfectly fine F words to use in a children's book.
So yeah, with going from Nightwolf, which is kind of like a PG-13, almost N-17 kind of like horror, and then Snowpaw being more like a YA, PG-13 or younger. I kind of struggled between the two of them, because obviously there's a lot of blood in Nightwolf, where there was like very mild in Snowpaw, but bringing it down to like the kids level, it's like, well, how do you resolve this without having werewolf, fights? You know what I mean? Like, how do you do this without like clawing and stuff like that? So basically what I had to do is I had to tap into like Snowpaw as a character. She's very clever in her own right, even in her own series and in Nightwolf. She's very intelligent. So she kind of had to use her brain and her wits to take the witches and get them to change Nightwolf back.
Yeah, let's even talk about this a little bit too, because what this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, where none of this is canon from Snowpaw or Nightwolf, where my understanding of your property, and correct me if I'm wrong, because if I'm off, I might be.
But yeah. This is definitely not canon to the comics at all. This is it lives in its own world. Really, it's just similarities in characters.
Because where I'm going with this, and sorry to cut you off, is that you obviously have these rooted characters in Nightwolf, and Snowpaw have been developed, and these other characters that are in this book, and potentially a sequel if you do a Valentine's Day book, a Christmas one. Right. Obviously, there's going to be characters that are there, but they're kind of, and I'm going to use a word, it might be slightly offensive to you, but I find this to be the chibi version. I'm a big Ruby fan, and there's Ruby Chibi, or Rock Lee, Naruto, Rock Lee and Friends, right? For those who understand Naruto, that is a very childish, very silly version of Naruto where there's no canon involved, where the bad guys are hanging out with Naruto and kind of just talking crap to each other. And so, like, that's how I view this, where
it's very similar. And it's kind of like because I kind of say they're Muppet Baby-ized versions, like it's basically, obviously the Muppet Babies are not canon to the Muppets, and kind of this, like the new Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends that's on like Disney Junior right now, that my daughter watches. It's Spider-Man, Ghost Spider, and the other Spider-Man, so Miles Morales. So all three of them are children together, and then like the bad guys come in and they do their thing in a very childlike way that they have to deal with it. So it's kind of similar to that. In this universe of the child versions, or chibi versions, as you like to say, it's basically kind of like they go to a monster grade school, and they're these monsters that they're not friends with attend this school as well. And it's just basically especially with like Snowpaw and Nightwolf in the main comic series. Obviously there's 200 years of age difference, whereas like Snowpaw was born in the 19th century and Nightwolf is born in the modern times. So there, obviously that's not happening here, where they're both basically the same age as pups.
But also what's fascinating is that obviously, let's say that a parent says, I like Nightwolf and I have a 5-year-old, there's going to be similarities where I think Rodney is Nightwolf, obviously his moral compass isn't changing. Snowpaw's, characteristic and what she believes in isn't changing. And even some of these bad guys or monsters or fiends, whatever you want to call them, their morality might not be changing. It just might be that I'm not going to kill you today. I'm just going to steal your toy.
Right. Exactly. Or in this case, your best friend as a toy.
Because that's what's interesting about this, is that you're taking likeness from your own property and you're recycling it and you're creating an alternative child world for it. And that's what I think is so fascinating about this. And I think this is what a lot of creators struggle with, to be honest, is understanding that I don't think and I have a very different opinion than other people about comics. I think there are two types of people. I think there are comic creators and IP developers. I think you are either creating a comic or you're creating an IP. And at this point, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I don't think Nightwolf and Snowpaw are comics. I think comics are the medium to distribute your idea. But now that you've created your alternative universe and you made a child and you made a picture book, it is clearly that you have transitioned from being a comic creator to being
I think I started that transition with the plush toy. And then like this kind of like lent into that as well. And even with the IP development, I'm also working on doing like 3D printed models, of the characters in their adult forms. So it's definitely, I've been working on making more out of what they are, just to be able to like give them the ability to grow. Because I would love to see them like in a video game. I would love to see them on TV. I would love to see them on the big screen.
And the reason why I bring this up is that I think a lot of creators struggle with this idea. And I don't think they want to hear it, where it's the idea that people give DC and Marvel a hard time that they've created IPs with Batman and Superman. But the easiest way to distribute Batman when it first came out, and even to this day, and the cheapest way, is in comic book format.
Right.
And so that's where I think a lot of creators, and I don't think they want to have this discussion. And there's nothing wrong with saying I am an IP developer and I want to find the cheapest, most efficient way that captures what I am doing with my IP and delivers it in the most cleanest, efficient, and effective way. And it could be that is a book. It could be that that's a board game. It could be a video game. It could be a 3D printed model, or it could be a toy, or it could be a comic. And I think that for you, I think Nightwolf in a comic was that form. And now you're expanding. And I think it's just so interesting. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want to be able to like see it in all realms. I've kind of grew up with that, watching, like obviously I was a big Marvel and I liked DC, and I grew up, with when Image kind of went from comics to then Todd McFarlane creating his toy line and a cartoon and a movie. So I mean, for me, I think it's kind of like a natural progression. You have these characters, and especially if they become popular, where I believe that these characters have picked up enough momentum that they're able to cross into these other mediums, to live on their own, to become their own creation, not dependent on what medium it is.
So that's an interesting point. I mean, do you feel that you have obviously after, I don't know, what is it, 8? It's more than 8 issues now, right?
We're 7 issues of Nightwolf and then 2 issues of Snowpaw. 8's being produced now, and issue 3 of Snowpaw should be getting started this month.
And so obviously, I mean, 9 issues out collectively so far, and then you're working on the next 2, 3 for Snowpaw and 8 for Nightwolf. Do you feel that obviously you've grown and there's been speed bumps along the way of growing, but do you also feel that sometimes you do need to push something out beyond the comic, like the plushie or a board game or a children's, book? Because sometimes I feel like you have to throw things out there and you have to say, hey, I belong here, because sometimes you have to drive the traffic or sometimes the traffic comes to you. Because I've had it both ways as an interviewer, where I've done interviews where a lot of traffic came to me and I've driven a lot of traffic to things. And I've done both. And I think that sometimes it is complicated, where it's tricky. And I think this is a big debate in comics, because I think sometimes when you do a plushie, so it says, why did this person do a plushie and what are they doing elsewhere? And it leads in and it becomes a funnel and it becomes a entry point, because this is weird. Or I'm trying to think, somebody does something weird. If somebody did a toothbrush, I'll throw a crazy idea and Brian Polito could take it. If Brian Polito did a Lady Death toothbrush, he would do 100,000 on that.
Oh, I'm sure.
I think he would do more than that, because he'd be like, this is the stupidest idea ever. I mean, and then there'd be an entry point into Lady Death, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think sometimes needs to happen, though. So I'm very curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, again, and once you have a product that people like and want to get more of, you're always constantly trying to come up with new things to do with it. Especially if you kind of like hit the nail on the head the first time. For me, it's been nonstop growth over the last 5 years. But again, the first speed bump I had was my very first Kickstarter. That was before I had an audience. So I threw something out there, nobody knew about it, and it failed, right? So then I got back up and I went to Comic-Cons and I made people know about it. I put it out there. I worked my butt off going Comic-Con to Comic-Con to Comic-Con to Comic-Con to Comic-Con so that people would know what this is. And then issue 2 came out. And then finally with issue 3, I was like, all right, let's try again with Kickstarter, right? And ever since then, I've had successful campaign after another, after another, after another. And then I'm like, all right, I'm comfortable in the comic zone. Let's throw something on the wall and see if it sticks. And that was the plushie. So was it one of my most successfuls? No, but it was still a successful campaign. And,
So let's actually talk about that too. So obviously, I have different parameters, and this might put me at odds with you, other people. I think there's a funding campaign. I think there's a successful campaign. And I think there is, I nailed it and hit a home run type of campaign. Mm-hmm. So if your goal is $1,000 and you did $1,000, you funded. Mm-hmm. That to me is not a successful campaign. That means you funded. Funding doesn't mean anything but you funded. You reached your goal. If you did 1,100, you exceeded your goal, but you didn't, you still, I wouldn't call that successful. If you did 1,500, 500 over your goal, and you need 1,000 to produce your book, I would call that a success. And then if you did $3,000 and your goal was 1,000, I would consider that like a home run. You knocked it out of the park.
Well, and then to your comment with the Nightwolf and Snowpaw, I set them at 10K and I overfunded around 20K. So to me, that was successful. Whereas like with the plushie, it was set at 10K and I almost made 11. So was it like overfunded? Not as much as I would have liked it to be.
I think you funded, and I think that's good. I think you crossed the finish line.
Right.
Because there's a difference between being first and finishing the marathon first and finishing the marathon. Because there's plenty of people who don't finish the marathon. And finishing a 26K marathon is impressive for anybody, even if it takes you 6 hours. Right. If you walk across that finish line, you still finished it. Okay. So I'm not here, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm not saying that funding isn't a feat in of itself, But I think too many times we call something successful when it funds versus did I do 15,000 when I was asking for 10?
Mhm.
You know, I think that there's a difference, and I think there's a big dishonesty in the community. I really do. And I think it's a problem because I think we need to call things what they are.
Well, and I also think too, like people are like, oh, well, why did you set like for the kids board book? I also set that at 10K. And am I struggling to get there? A little bit because one, it's a kid's book, and two, it's a new property. But I set it at 10K because that's what I need to actually get this thing out there without going in the hole.
But we're going to talk about the other side in 1 second because you're bringing it up right, yeah. And where I want to be is this is the other thing too, is that you could fund your book and that's just half of the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the other part that I put up a post. I don't know if you saw it a little while ago. I said, remember, a successful campaign is not if it funds, but when it is fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need 10K to fulfill everybody,
mm-hmm.
you could have, I crossed the finish line in my goal and I did 11,000 on it and I needed 10, but 10 gets me to fulfillment and every backer is going to get their book.
Yes.
So
exactly.
that's when you could say I had a successful fulfillment side.
Yes.
And that's where I think people don't understand is that if you set your goal to 5K, you would make 5K by the end of this without a doubt. I'm 100%.
Oh yeah, and that's just it. But if I make 5K, you know,
you fulfill.
That's just it because then 4,000 is the bare minimum book order. So and that's like, you know, for me that would be like, okay, well then now if I, you know, that didn't pay for the art. You know, I already paid my artist. So I'm already in the hole because I paid my artist before this campaign. So that's not, you know, that's not here nor there. But you know, but if I only made 5, then that would only leave me 1,000 for fulfillment. And that would be shipping. That would be any rewards that go along with it, you know, and we all know that, you know, shipping isn't cheaper anymore. You know, it keeps going up every couple months. So, you know, that for me, I'm the one who's like, I'm not going to be that guy who starts at $1,000 when I actually need 10. You know what I mean? For me, it's like, hey, if it doesn't fund, then that's no more money out of my pocket. You know what I mean?
Let's actually talk about this. This is financial advisement.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that people don't understand is that obviously I run an eBay business where I outlay a lot of money buying books and then I sell those books. And it is tricky. And my favorite thing to do is pre-sales. And I've learned a very valuable lesson that it can go the other way very hard, very quickly. Where people get upset and the book doesn't come in fast enough for somebody, they want their money back, and it creates a whole big problem. I also understand that I deal with items that nobody has the books I'm selling those. So if somebody doesn't want it today, well, they're not buying it from somebody else.
Yeah.
And the books I'm buying they don't come up on eBay all that often anyway. So I'm not really that concerned where I don't have certain cancellations on certain properties and certain items, but I outlay a lot of money. And I'm well aware, and I don't think people understand the concept of a stopgap, and that if you outlaid, I don't know, we'll pick a number. If you outlaid $3,000 to do this book on just an art level, the most you can lose if you put your goal at 10,000 is only $3,000.
Exactly, and that's exactly where I'm at.
That's where I think a lot of people don't understand. And we were speaking off air, and I think the conversation can be brought publicly. I don't think it's controversial. Is that the reason why I think a lot of books are late is because people don't have the funding. I really think that I know a lot of people who basically do 1,500 on their campaign. They ask for 1,000 and they're figuring out how to get their book funded and get the extra 1,000 they need to do it and print it. And I think that's a real problem where maybe you should have asked for 2,000. And if you didn't get to your 2,000, you would have had a stopgap in there. And you would have had to figure out, hey, what went wrong here that I need to reshoot it out, and I need to figure out how to get to 2,000.
Yeah, I mean that's just it. Like I know, like people say, oh, well, you need to pump the algorithm, you know, by going low and hitting 100% right away. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I like you said, like I would rather be out like you know the art, because here's the thing, the book's done digitally. So worst case scenario, if this doesn't fund, I have other avenues that I could take this print ready book. You know what I mean? Like I could go to somewhere like Amazon, or I could approach, a publisher.
Do you also feel that, technically speaking, that you could shelf this till next year too,
Mhm.
or you could even shelf it for June, and then you could say, hey, it'll be delivered in September of October as well, where maybe the whole problem with the book is that you're doing a Halloween book in September, October, that's going to be delivered in April.
Right.
And maybe it has to be shifted up so that the book arrives in September, October.
I mean, that could very well be. I mean, it's that's the nature of the game. Unfortunately, with crowdfunds, is that you still have to wait for the product to be produced, and
You understand my point is that
I do,
if this
yeah,
thing doesn't fund,
yeah.
there's 10 other options
Oh yeah, that's I could,
because
or I could like pair it up with another campaign and just do it simultaneously. Though I would probably not do that because then that would just like lead the chance that I would be in the hole either way. They have other options, and I'm not afraid of this not funding. I would love
I'm
it to fund.
asking this. You know why I'm asking this? I mean, this is a very rational
Yeah.
thought process where I think this is one of the problems where making comics is expensive.
Oh yeah.
It's not
Comic
as
books, it's
expensive.
not cheap.
I mean, making an animated television series is way more expensive.
Hmm.
Doing, a movie is way more expensive.
Hmm.
But making a comic book is difficult and it is pricey and it is a complicated process. And I think a lot of people don't want to have these honest discussions. And there's a reason why I'm not doing a book. I mean, honestly, it's not a story problem. It is very expensive. It is timely. And then how do you distribute your book? You
Hmm.
got to hustle the fuck out of your book. Sorry, trying not to curse with the children's book here, but, that's a problem. It's not $6,000 to produce a book. It's like 10 now
Hmm.
because you have to factor in your hourly wage. You got to factor in a lot of things.
Oh yeah, and I am not the guy. Like for me, I would rather pay to have the art done out of my own pocket before it goes live because one, I want to make sure that artist gets paid for their time, and two, I don't like going live until the book is 100% complete. So as you said, like going in the hole only for the art, that's fine. I have many other avenues to do it after this one way or the other. It's it's my IP. I can do with what I want with, and I'm not afraid of failure. I've been through this already, and look where I gotten with my books lately.
It's tricky because a lot of people I feel can't do that. Or what a lot of people are trying to do in the comic industry is they're trying to do 20 books a year. And I know people who want to do 20 books. And my question to them is saying, I'm glad you're going to have 18 books on your table in 3 years. I'm glad. Are you profitable? Are you profitable? Are you safe for retirement? Do you have money to buy a house? Are you taking money off the table if this thing goes south? Where you have had successful books, but you're taking all your money and you're pumping out a script here, pumping out a script here, doing a book. And great, 18 books, but are you profitable on all 18 of those books? Are only 3 of those books profitable? And the other 15 haven't broken even yet and are putting you in the hole. Because I
Mhm.
think this is where business sense really comes in, where I think your business is relatively stable. I don't know your numbers, but from what I get and what I understand, is you're not overextending yourself by writing 10 scripts,
Oh
pumping
no.
out 10 books at the same time, and trying to be everywhere all at once. And I think that's a problem right now. And I actually think a bunch of people are going to go belly up in the next 2 years. I really do.
Yeah, luckily for me, I have a full time job, and that's that keeps my family and everything, benefits and all that fun stuff. This it's it's its own business entity, and I only have so much time and money to put out stuff.
Do you think though that's a good thing? And I come from a very different angle, and I'll explain my thought process. I don't know if you heard this story about a guy who was a janitor and he worked like in a bunch of cars, and he was like a department guard security, and he has like 4 or 5 hospitals named after him. He never made more than 60,000 in a year, and he invested in all these basic blue chip stocks. And when he was investing, there was no phones, and you had to go drive around town. They then had to basically mail you a stock certificate. And so he held on to his stuff and he collected the dividends essentially.
Yeah.
And because he never sold and he just put a certain amount of money away every single paycheck, all of a sudden when he died, his family was surprised that he was worth $15 million. And he didn't really have much time per se to truly think about it, but he just did it. And I think that's a problem too, is that I think maybe now people have too much time and they're focusing on 15 projects. Maybe if you only have 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours a week for this, that's all you have. And then guess what? You utilize your 10 hours for 3 properties and that's all you're focusing on. And I think this is one of the problems right now in comics is that people are trying to focus on too much versus specializing.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why I kind of like had turned back internally and focused on these IPs, because I don't have the time. I have other titles that I would love to work on, but I want to get these to a point where they kind of live on their own and like get to a point where like this 12-issue story arc is done, and then I can move on. Like with Snowpaw, it's the first story arc is 4 issues, so I can make trades out of them, repackage, resell, and then I can be like, okay, well now these are kind of like living on their own, and the after sales of their existence, I can move on to something new. And if I find that something new doesn't pan out, I could always go back and continue their stories.
Do you also feel that if Nightwolf is working, Snowpaw is working, if Wolf Pup books are working, that you should obviously always look for new things that are going to be the next big thing, but maybe you shouldn't deviate away from what's working, because there is something to be said where if every time you do a Nightwolf book, you're going to do $15,000 to $22,000, and the next one does that, the next one does that, the next one does that, and it costs way less than that, you don't necessarily need to have a $300,000 campaign.
Oh no, exactly.
A profitable machine that allows you to continue to do this, allows the company to grow, and then the business becomes self-sustainable. And then, ultimately the goal is to pay off all the debts that you've incurred to get to this point, and then have a debt-free business. And then it just spins off capital. Isn't that the point beyond just creation?
That's what Brian Pulido's done. Look, so when he first started, right, not just like for working for the other companies, but when he was doing Evil Ernie and Lady Death, look where he attached himself to, and he continued doing Lady Death, and then he had now he's this big conglomerate with his own publishing, and he put out La Morta, or he's also put out some like Hell Witch or these other little spin-off thingies, but he's still focusing on Lady Death as his main thing. Like he has a Lady Death almost every month, and then he has like this other side project, has another little side project, another Lady Death. You see what I'm saying?
Because that's what I also think sometimes is happening in comics right now, is that a lot of people are shooting out and they're taking this shotgun approach, as I like to call it, which is, for those who don't know what a shotgun is, it has pellets. So it's a wide-ranging, attack mode, for lack of a better word. It has a blast like that, or better like that, versus a sniper rifle, which is
they're trying to take shots in the dark and see what hits.
And that's why I think a bunch of people are trying to do 18 things and then they're trying to figure out which works. And that's fine and dandy, but that's also really, really, really expensive.
And risky.
Yeah, risky is a good way to put it too, but it's really, really expensive. Creating 18 titles and then seeing 1 out of 18 or 2 out of 18, because it's going to take you 2 or 3 or 3 issues to figure out. So you're going to have to produce, what is that, 54, I want to say, 54 issues to figure out 3 winners. That's massively pricey, which, and you have to build up all of that to see what works organically, what drives traffic, and then what do you drop? And then what happens if you drop the wrong one? It gets bad. It gets bad real quick. And this is why I say I think creators are going to go belly up. And I think a bunch of these have 9 to 5 jobs. And if you have, I'm really bad at math. Well, what is 3 over 18? I'm so bad at math. Um, I'm trying to do it in my head too. This is not.
You're asking me like 10 o'clock at night.
But
like
whoever figures it out can
one,
figure out the math.
uh,
I mean, three. What is that? 1/6? Is it 1/6?
Yeah.
So yeah. This is not. We're not the math crew. I don't know what type of math classes you were in high school, but I was not in. I was in like special ed math, and I have a good idea for money. I have a good idea for percentages, but if you put algebra in front of me, I'm just gonna fail.
You know, I used to be good in algebra, but then I stopped using it in college. So it's like that's not like the top of my head. You know what I mean? Like I don't, I do web design and graphic design. I don't have to do numbers.
My best friend's a chemist, and he's very good at math. He's very good at chemistry, and he did half of my chemistry homework, and he did all of my chemistry labs. I got like a B+ in chemistry because of my chemistry labs. I barely passed the New York State Regents. Barely. I got like a 72. Hey, when it was getting graded, I got my 72. I jumped up and down. I was beyond thrilled. But I digress. Chemistry was fun, but it wasn't fun because there was chemistry. My lab partner was a very attractive young woman.
Chemistry, I'm sure you were paying attention to something else then.
Oh, there was no chemistry between us. She was on her BlackBerry looking up and then whining to the women across from us on the lab table about her boyfriend cheating on her. And I'm like, hi, honey. So that has nothing to do with your book. That has nothing to do with books or comics. My life story is very different. That's Friday night, guys. If you'd like to join me, that's Friday night after the professional hour of my new radio show coming to a station near you. But yeah, so even though I do want to back out of this and add a controversial stuff and get into more controversial stuff here, getting back to your books, because this is the part that's also interesting, is that you have to build a new audience as well with this.
Yeah, that is.
I know it's a little tricky because you have an already existing audience. When you go on Kickstarter, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding, is that if you launch one project and people back it, they get notified when you back another automatically. So you do have a semi-built-in audience, but the audience that you have on Kickstarter might not necessarily be parents. It might not be school districts. It might not be a comic shop that caters to children. And so you have to go find those stores, those people. Some of these people probably have young kids and they're probably backing. But also some of them might say, look, I am 25 and I don't have a kid yet. And your book doesn't fit me.
Yeah.
It looks good. It's a good product, but it's not for moi.
Right.
Per se. And so what is that like? Because it's a tricky thing where you're obviously converting some, but you also have to go find a new audience, and it exists. But the question is that where does it exist? Because they're all somewhere on the internet. And once you tap in, it's like striking oil.
Right. Yeah. So I've been able to, I think, the people who have backed me and who either want to support me or who are interested in the product for their kids or grandkids have, I think, come over. So those are like, I almost have 100 backers now for this campaign, and a majority of them are past backers. And so building the new audience, that's something that I've been trying to do from the get. I've been handing out cards. I had a Comic-Con this past weekend. Anybody who had a kid, I was handing them cards.
Do you think that, I mean, and I'm curious because children's books are very complicated, in which that there are certain things that just naturally hit. So I think Todd Kelly had a book about his dog and like how his dog goes on adventures and think a gigantic plushie is the enemy. And if you have a little, toy dog, imagine what they think that a 7-foot plushie bear that somebody gave, to a girl they like for Valentine's Day, well, your dog's going to think about that,
Yeah.
right? It's a funny book, right? That book funded really, really easily because I think people relate to their dog. I think people relate to that. I think it's an easy children's book, fun comic, all ages book.
Mhm.
Where you're like, I love my dog and I just want to read a nice story about my dog. It's $15. What the hell, right? But then I think you get into other things like I think Catch the Craze. Oh shoot, what is Sam's last name? I can't think of. I think it's Sam. I don't know. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He does Duty, I
Yeah.
think,
Mhm.
and I think he had a hard time on one or two of his campaigns, where it is a children's book, but for whatever reason it doesn't connect. And so I'm curious, where do you even feel like it's missing? Because children's books are so complicated because there is a want for it. I think a lot of parents want good books. I think even going beyond political ramifications and things like that, I think most parents want their children to read wholesome stories. And I
I,
think this is a relatively wholesome story.
yeah, I think the problem is that one, and even like the Kickstarter publishing heads have even told me this, that children's books oftentimes don't fund on Kickstarter. Like it's unless like you have a huge audience already built up, it's going to be a struggle. And I knew this going into it. But for some reason, it's just that's just it's a tough genre to break into. And so I think they're not like comic Kickstarters, whereas like comic people who, right now comics, like you said, like are saturated throughout Kickstarter. People are used to buying multiple comics, and they're checking. They're like they know how the ecosystem works. Let's say, like for example, one author is well known, brings their audience into Kickstarter. They buy their book on Kickstarter, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to the next one. They're not going to continue looking at other campaigns. That might be
We'll throw it out there. Brandon Sanderson, who did $46 million on Kickstarter.
right.
That wasn't good for the comic industry. No. It's a negative opinion. I've had serious debates with people on this topic. Because, it's a great thing. I said, no, it's not. What are you talking about?
Well, like I said, just because he came doesn't mean that's going to translate
It was good for one organization, just one, no two. I will correct myself. It was good for Brandon Sanderson and it was good for Kickstarter.
Yes.
It was not good for anyone else because yes, statistically, if you bring in 5 to 10,000 new people and new users on Kickstarter, or even 15,000 new users, great. Somebody is going to convert to something else on Kickstarter.
Right.
But what are we talking about? 1%? 1% of 15,000 isn't a lot. It's not a lot. What is that? 150 people?
If that, yeah.
I mean, 150 people. I would take that bet. 150 people bought a comic from were converted.
Anderson,
I would take that bet. If somebody gave me 100 plus odds, I would take the bet in a heartpeat.
But But here's the thing: was it the same comic, or were they spread 150 campaigns?
Oh, I mean, either way, that's still good. The fact that somebody sticked around and backed another campaign, but that's 1%. I mean, the point is that, where I'm going with this is that you brought up the point where that's the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And children's books, they're incredibly difficult because it's just, my take is that the question is that it's for a child. So the parent is buying it for the kid. Mm-hmm. And so now that's where it gets complicated, is that if a child goes to a Barnes and Noble, they're picking out their book they want.
Right.
The kid's not going on Kickstarter. Little Johnny, who's 7.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. The book having in hands one thing versus like something they can't have for another 6 months. I totally get that. And it makes total sense. And that's kind of like, in the other side of that too, is that like a lot of the people I know who are parents, they're not necessarily using Kickstarter. One, they're more worried about like, what's going on with their day-to-day budgets and bills, especially, having kids and stuff and, diapers and all that. You know, there's also the other thing that like not everybody knows how to use Kickstarter yet. Matter of fact, my daughter's dance teacher, who's roughly my age and has kids roughly my daughter's age, she backed the campaign, but I had to basically tell her how to back the campaign. She was like, "How do I do this?" So
isn't it interesting, right?
Yeah,
Where we assume, and I think this is a good lesson for everybody, is that if we assume that everybody knows how to use Kickstarter, and honestly, I think every campaign should have a how-to, section on their campaign, how to back this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a problem. I think it's an issue. Because Kickstarter isn't difficult to use, but I don't know how you're older than me. My parents are older. I don't think they would know how to use Kickstarter.
So I think it also depends on the personality, because like my dad is very technologically illiterate, whereas my mother, I think, is where I get my technological know-how, because like she is very computer savvy.
That's fair enough, but I think it just in a generalization, if you have somebody who's 80 years old, they're statistically, and I don't want to make I'm making a generalization, they're probably gonna have a hard time figuring out how to use Kickstarter. And then they want to buy, grandma and grandma want to buy the book for little Johnny. They see it and they don't know how to back it, and it creates a whole problem, because they're like, yeah, I want to do this, but I don't know how to do it. And then I don't mind waiting 3 months for it. But again, I want to, and I don't mind giving little Johnny in September, in April, but that's not the issue here. It's, I don't understand how this works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the people sometimes are like, oh, well, I don't have the money right now, maybe when I get paid, but they don't understand the concept that they're actually not, it doesn't get charged until the 20th. So some people still don't like that idea of like, oh, well, I can't spend my money hoping that it doesn't go out.
I understand that too, because there's a certain generation that's been where this is the thing that Indiegogo that I'm torn on, where I like using a debit card and I don't like having a debt hanging over me sometimes, unless there's a good reason for it. Sometimes there is good reason, because you utilize that in fancy ways. I've done it. If somebody wants to know how to do that, I am always open to have a discussion, both publicly and privately, about how to use debt in advantageous ways. I like to churn credit cards, in case anybody didn't know. Boy, you can get some serious good vacation points if you know what you're doing. You could pay for your vacation by churning credit cards. But anyway, that's not financial advice. You probably shouldn't do it at all. It's a terrible idea. I'm just giving everybody a heads up. It's a terrible idea. I advise you not to do it unless you know what the fuck you're doing. But there is a concept where people don't like that outstanding debt. And in Indiegogo, you get charged immediately. But I find this whole thing interesting, because when you are doing projects that struggle on Kickstarter and you're trying to crowdfund it, I kind of think it goes back to the originality of Kickstarter and what Kickstarter was meant for and what crowdfunding was meant for, which is to crowdfund an idea. And I think this is where this is so interesting, is that this is kind of step one again of what I think is supposed to be, where you can't do this without Kickstarter.
Yeah, so I can't currently print without Kickstarter at the moment.
No, you can't do it without Kickstarter. We're taking that stance.
I
can't do it without it, you guys. You can't do it without it. This book, if you want to see it being made, you got to spend the money. You got to make it happen.
Yes. Well, that's just it. Like, I want this book to be printed. I want it to be out in hands. I really love this project. I want it to be in my daughter's hands, and I want it to be in your kids' hands. It's a great book. It's a great fun story, cute, characters. And it's a great thing, for you to share with your kids, point blank.
I'll read it to my dog. I'm sure he'll love it.
Well, but here's another thing about it too, is that like I'm also offering things that, like, if you're not into kids books, that's cool. Do you have a business? I'm offering a simple website design or of an advanced website design. Those are two different tiers, and highly discounted from my normal website rates. I'm also doing Kickstarter consulting. So that's also a pledge or an add-on. The add-on's cheaper than the pledge because the pledge you get all the stuff. But those are options for people who don't want the book.
Let's actually talk about this too, because this is one of the things that I think is really interesting. So I've backed Kickstarters because I knew that, and it said explicitly on it that, hey, the shop or the add-ons are all private and there's some exclusive stuff. Zenescope does a really good job of this, where there's a lot of stuff on their add-ons that are not on their campaign. So what sometimes happens with Zenescope's campaigns, from my understanding, and this is what I've been told and what I have seen, is somebody will back something for $6. Pat Chan did this with Prison Witch or Destiny New York. You could buy the 2 promo cards or the 3 promo cards for $6. Then you could pretty much get access to Pat's whole physical library. Yeah. So let's say you missed Prison Witch. You're like, man, I missed that book. That book's awesome. I want all 3 of them at $60. Boom. You spend $6. You now have access to buying every physical copy he has that's not an exclusive or limited. So I don't think Pat has a problem reprinting Prison Witch. So now I had a friend who missed it and said, hey, he's got this thing and here's the backlog. If you spend the $6, you get access to the whole backlog.
Right.
And I think that all counts towards the campaign funding, from my understanding.
It does.
And so I think that's what gets interesting. I think that is what people have to learn how to do efficiently, especially when you have big libraries. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting because you do have other things outside of this kid's book. And I think it'd be interesting if you had like a copy of Nightwolf, the first issue, even though it's not exactly perfect, because somebody might say, hey, I missed that and I don't want to wait. And now if I could back the first issue of Nightwolf or issue 7 or a trade paperback, and that was a tier, well, somebody might say, look, this isn't for me. I don't have kids, but now I can get access to it. Or if you had a bunch of exclusive stuff still left over, all of a sudden that's in your back catalog and you explicitly said, hey, if you spend $5, you get access to the backlog. All of a sudden, I think that's the key.
Well, that is an idea that I had thought of. The one issue with that is, one, I'm trying to keep it separate. There's also the Nightwolf campaigns has like the adult covers. So clearly I'm trying to avoid that connection. The other thing is that my issue 7 had printing issues. So I'm still kind of waiting for the books for the third time. It had it wasn't just once, twice had printing issues. So I'm waiting for the third reprint.
Let's actually talk about it. There's 2 things I want to talk about. Obviously, I had a pretty big printing issue. I don't know if you know what happened with Merc Mag and all that stuff. That's the printing issue of the year. For those who don't know, it's not that hard of a story to find. Actually, I saw no coverage on it, which is ridiculous. They got a nice cease and desist, to put it politely.
Oh, wow.
Let's just say that it's very rare for a parody cover to get a cease and desist. And if you get a cease and desist and you're a parody cover, you cross the line. But I don't want to talk too much about that. I am curious though, because you do want to keep them separate. I mean, is it that you want to keep them separate until they establish themselves? Because to me, this is where I'm going with this, is that at some point, I mean, let's say this thing funds, right? Would you be open to putting it on as an add-on on a Nightwolf campaign versus putting Nightwolf into this? Because, and the reason why I ask that is because it is tricky sometimes when you have properties that are similar and rooted in the same root of an IP, but then they have divergences. Because I think if you put a kid's book as an add-on in an adult thing, it's different if you put an adult thing as an add-on in a kid's.
Exactly.
I think it's kind of like water can't go uphill.
Yeah.
It can go downhill. I mean, that's not true. That's not true. Sometimes it can go uphill. Sometimes it can. But for the most part, and 99% of the time, it goes downhill.
Mhm. Yeah, so it is. It's definitely easier to do it as an add-on with a Snowball or a Nightwolf campaign, as aside from the other way around. I mean, I suppose that like I probably could do Snowpaw add-ons, because it's still kind of like in that young adult like
I mean,
area.
there's a thought process, and the reason why I asked this is that there's a game going on right now with funding.
Mhm.
And I don't think this is a secret where you have to do not safe for work covers in a lot of ways. You have to do limited covers. You
Yeah.
have to do the limited 100s. You have to do the medals. You have to do the high ticket items.
Hmm.
It's just you got to fund your creation.
Hmm.
And it gets complicated because great, your story's good, your art's good, your book, it's an interesting concept, an interesting hook, for instance. But how do you get funded? And that's where this gets tricky. Or
Hmm.
do you build a YouTube personality? We've seen that, Eric July, Tyler Carpenter to some degree. We've seen other people do it other ways where it is you have cheap product or you're everywhere. You spend a lot of money on Facebook marketing. Like it is a very, very gamified position. And that's why this is so complicated when you do a children's book is you lose certain venues.
Hmm. Oh yeah, because there's no variant covers. It's you can't do metal covers. You can't even like do CGCs with these, because it's a legit. This is a kid's board book. It is what it is. And I think that with pairing the plushie with it, it helped for sure. Because that's it's not like a cheap plushie at all by no means. It's a high quality plush, and this is a high quality board book.
No, because I think this is what's so fascinating is that you've done almost 39%, which is a little under $4,000. And I mean, I know campaigns that don't do $4,000, and that's what's crazy is that you've done a good job and you've kickstarted a lot of money, but it's also expensive to do all this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't think at 10K you're making much money on this whole thing. I think you're breaking even. You might even be losing a little bit of money on this, but I think you're getting to produce a bunch of books that you get to enter phase two. Because I think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my take on children's books, is that the real play is at cons. I think with kids' books, I think that is the ultimate play with children's books.
Yes, having a book in hand at a con is definitely key to
I
building.
think with children's books, it's even more key.
Yes.
Versus with and I'll throw Brian Polito or Pat Chan a little bit under the bus. I don't think them having a book at a con, if it's not a children's book, is as effective. Where I think children's books slay at cons, I really do, because parents bring their kids.
Well, that's just it. That's a whole different audience that you can't tap into with your comics, especially if you're doing like teenage plus. Clearly you can get the general populace with your comics, but as you said, but there's the people walking around with the kids. Everybody that I handed that card to, if I would have had that book at the table, they would have walked off with it. They loved the art on the card. They thought it was a great concept. It just because I didn't have it on hand.
You're in a quandary.
Yeah,
In a quandary because the real question for you to some degree, and again, hate to put you on the spot, is that you need to print the books, because even if you borrowed $4,000 to print the books and then you did 10 cons, you would break even at some point. It might take you 15 cons, might take you 20, but the question is that do you want to incur the debt? Do you want to now have to deal with it? Do you want to have to wait? Do you want that debt looming over you, but you need to print the books? And now you need to get the funding to print the books. And this is where the vicious cycle of children's books come in.
Well, and that's just it. Like, like when I had my first failed Kickstarter, I printed the books myself. And that took time to because I did the campaign in 2016. It took me over a year in 2017 to actually print the book. So it's not that I won't do it. It's that it will just take longer, which is fine. I've done it before. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It just means that I got to, yeah. I mean, I get a little bit down for a minute, but then I pick myself back up and I'm going to figure out, like, I will do freelance web design jobs. I will figure out how to do it. it's, eventually I'll get it out there. It's just, do I do it this time, or do I, like I said, I have many avenues. I'm not afraid.
I got no problem. I've been doing my show. I tried doing a Kickstarter for this show, and I realized what a bad idea it was. And no. This is what everybody failed to understand is that great, I funded. I'm probably not gonna do it again. And guess what? I now ask who I want on my show, and there's been plenty of people who've asked, and I'm like, I'm not interested. And this is what happens: is that everybody spoke, and I heard the message loud and clear. Everybody needs interviews. I know in the past 5 days, I've gotten more requests than I threw out so many requests in the summer, got nowhere. Turns out everybody was busy. Everybody now wants media. But I'm like, great, I got 12 spots a month. Like there's 40 requests, 12 spots, and I have another 20 people that I'm aiming for. So that means 60 opportunities plus are out there for me, and there's only 12 spots. And if people paid, those spots would be even fewer because they would be reserved. And
Right.
so I have no problem doing it myself. I get to do it on my terms. And that's what everybody, I think, doesn't understand now. And because, well, there's other shows. And I'm like, but those other shows are probably following my model too.
Oh, that, and yeah, a lot of them are probably booked.
And now all of a sudden, this is why media is becoming a problem. And then when I say it's $5 or $10 or $20, I'm like, oh, I'm not paying for that. I'm like, but are you on anybody else's show? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, that's the problem. So, and you're like, well, I'm going to still fund, but I'm like, but you have to realize media is effective. And that's what I think when you self-fund and you do this book yourself, you get to call the shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's very powering. I still think you call some shots on Kickstarter, but you also lose a lot of freedom on Kickstarter. Like, I don't want to, if I don't have to fund a book on Kickstarter, I won't fund a book on Kickstarter because I would rather call every single shot my way.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. And it just, it also depends on how you build your audience too. Like, obviously like with the Night Wolf and Snowpaw, they've been built around creating, after the first failed Kickstarter, when I went back for 3, ever since then, it's been like building up, Kickstarter audience. Con audiences, obviously is another thing. I have people who just wait till I come back to the next con to pick up the latest issues that, that I put out. So, people shop in different places, and you're not going to get everybody in one bucket. So you have to be open to laying out buckets everywhere to catch all of the drips.
No. There's going to be 2 buckets, and that's what I'm going to. And you're going to comply. You're going to comply in how I do my business. You're going to comply. If I do a Kickstarter, there'll be a Kickstarter. There will be an eBay bucket, and then maybe there'll be 5 cons relatively local, and then maybe there'll be a 4th one. But I'm not going to do 20 buckets. That's ridiculous. I've learned I take a Netflix, Amazon, Peacock approach where a show is exclusively on here, and if you want to watch it, you got to subscribe. And I think that's a great bucket. I really do. I think actually limiting where people can get your product is actually one of the best marketing strategies. I think the fact that Peacock has WWE exclusively is brilliant. If you're a WWE fan, I'm for Peacock for life as long as that's on there. If they went to Disney Plus, here we come. Doesn't matter what Disney's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. I'm a fan of WWE. Got to go to Disney. If Disney buys them or they're signing a deal with Disney, if they sign a deal with Amazon, Amazon, here we go. That's what it is. I don't have a choice. And I think forcing your audience to be in one place is actually smart versus giving them an option saying, well, that's not going to be at a con.
Again, I think too that like not everybody's going to go to Kickstarter, so you can't force to one place. That's why
they miss it.
But I also have my own website where I'm not paying fees for somebody to sell my stuff. You know what I mean? So that's my other bucket.
I'll be honest. If I do a book, there's going to be an eBay only book. If I do it on Kickstarter, there's going to be only on Kickstarter. And then there's going to be everything else might be on eBay and it might be on Kickstarter.
Like you're doing limited variants per bucket. So.
But I'm probably not going to have my own website. I'm probably going to say, look, it's eBay or Kickstarter, how you want to run it. And if you don't want to use either of those platforms, I'm sorry. like you have to comply because because my time is limited. I'm not
Right.
interested in laying
You're
out.
also on eBay, whereas I'm not. So like I'm using my website as
Fair
my.
enough. That is true. That is true. My point is that I think driving traffic and giving people only a few options sometimes is actually better.
Mhm.
That's just my thought.
Well,
And people
and
can
that is
disagree
easier
with me.
for you to maintain too. I mean, you're not like obviously, that's what like if somebody was to do like direct marketing to like the retailers or whatever, that's the other buckets that somebody else can deal with. I'm more focusing on between going to Comic Cons, coming to Kickstarter, and doing my website.
True, true. I mean, look, I have my own opinions, and that's perfectly fine. And everybody else, you can all experiment with yours, and you will be wrong. You will all come around to my thought process. I promise. By choice, by realizing the promising land, or by force. Believe me, you do not want to see me when I become a werewolf. I've been waiting to drop that joke for a while. I've been waiting,
Yeah, I was gonna say like how many times have I been on here?
I've been waiting a long time for that one. That's a new joke. That's a new joke. I wrote that joke like in the middle of the Jets game last night, everybody. So we all know where my sense of humor is at. If anybody watched the game last night, I'm letting everyone know it's September 12th. Yesterday was September 11th, 2023 for reference. Just go back in time and watch that game. You'll understand. Middle of the second quarter, you'll understand how I feel. I was in a very dark place, and I'm not a Jets fan either, which is even worse. But I digress right there. But I actually do want to talk about some of your rewards. And what I find actually some interesting stuff, since we're talking about avenues, is your retail package.
Mm-hmm.
Your retail package is actually pretty good on this. Both of them, I think, are pretty good. So, and I actually think it's really smart. And I think it's an opportunity for a comic shop. So I think there's the retail package for 10 books, if I'm not mistaken, for, is it 100 or is it 200?
Yeah, 100.
So it's 10 a book. And obviously they can mark that book at $20 and get a quick, little under 50% because you do have to pay fees. It does take up some space. But if you are a kid-friendly comic shop or you're trying to be, or you have a little kid section, that's a very helpful thing in certain ways. And there's a comic shop where I'm at called Ohia Comics in Harrison, and they tend to be kid-friendly. And so I think it's actually really, really smart because it doesn't cost a comic shop a huge amount of money.
Yeah, exactly. It's very affordable, and it's great to get in there for the kids because they're the ones who are going to keep this industry going. Like, get them in. Bring the kids in.
And even talking about this, because this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. And I deal with retail now, and I just had a conversation. I picked up a retail package from Timothy Fling, and obviously I've worked with Dustin Brunell that I'm expecting. And at some point, I'm probably going to work with Tom Hutchinson from Big Dog Inc. And what everybody has to understand is that you have to sell me your book if you want me to be in retail at a price that leaves enough room for you to make money and for me to make money. So if you're MSRPing your book at 20, you can't sell me your book at 15. There's no money for me.
Right.
You have to sell me your book at $8 or $9 because it does take up space. There are fees, whether that's a credit card fee, shipping fees, eBay fees. And if you're printing the book for $5, well, you're going to be like, well, I can make $15 on Kickstarter. I might be reaching a different audience than you are. And that you're selling me 20, 30, 40 bucks. And that's what I think people have to understand about retail is that it's exposure when you sell to a store or an eBay store or a website. And also it's it's a very quick sale in a lot of ways. And it's also moving volume where if you have to print 4,000 copies of your book and a store wants 40 copies of your book, they just took off how many books you're going to have in your, I guess, reserves, or they just got you a little bit lower or they're getting you to break even a little bit quicker.
Right. Yeah. And, and warehouse space ain't cheap.
Yeah. It's called my basement. It's terrible. It's terrible. And I know people who have warehouses and self-storage is not cheap. It's complicated. Also, it can get very, very, very expensive and very dangerous. If you have a lot of comics, I hate to say this, but you can be stolen from. It's not unheard of. It happens all the time. Most times, though, a lot of people get caught really quickly. If you steal comics, it is actually very hard to sell them and move them,
Oh yeah.
especially rare books. Rare books are impossible to move if they're stolen. But that again, that's a whole different discussion. That's like hours long on protection. On protection, I mean, if somebody, I have a Saga One, graded CBCS. If that book was stolen from me, that book would be found in 6 hours or less.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That'd be easy. Like anything graded with it because they have serial numbers on them.
Even if you were to crack it open, it's pretty trackable right now. But I digress on that point. But and then you have an advanced package too, which I think is also really cool, where it's I think another $10 with the plushies. That's a little bit more pricey, but this is where this gets really interesting as well, because now this provides a bump up and an upsell for a comic shop, because any rational and thought process comic shop could have storytime reading hour on Halloween night with this book.
Oh yeah.
Or whenever it comes out and you pair it with the plushie, and now you have a book that is paired with that. It's an upsell. It's still a discount, and there's real money to be made here in pairing it. And that's the other thing that I think is really interesting about your campaign with this, is that I think your retail package is fascinating for stores.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make it affordable for them. I know that like, especially, most retailers, they don't make a lot of money off of like the indies, but like, I want to make it fair for them. I want to make it fair for me. I want to make it so that like it's basically, they're putting it in their stores. They're giving it to a market that I can't reach. And, I want us to have a good relationship.
Because let me ask you this. If a store bought 10, and I'm just curious, and you printed 4,000, I mean, you're not going to move 4,000 books very quickly. I don't think you are. I think your goal is to have a bunch of this stuff and then have a bunch left over and then move.
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing this to have stock.
So I mean, if I do technically, now that I revise my position, if I do a Kickstarter for a book, I will probably do it to buy stock more than anything else. Because I think having stock, having that backlog, and having merch is so helpful. Helpful. I have metal cards still from my campaign. That's part of why I bought the metal cards. It was somewhat business expense. There's tax advantages, and then having a bunch of metal cards and a bunch of other stuff for later on stuff is so helpful.
Oh yeah, I mean, even when I do like a reward, like usually it's something that I can resell later, like to people who aren't getting it for free. Like they'll get it for free at the campaign, but like at a con table, for example, like my last campaign, I had acrylic standees. I'll take those to cons with me, once my the campaign's fulfilled, and I'll sell them there.
If I do a campaign, what I'll probably do is I'll print a bunch of rewards and I'll just throw them into eBay packages, because if I can make a buyer happy and I'm a day late, guess what happens? I get a great review.
Yeah.
It's like, man, you just threw me a free comic. I'm coming back to you, man. You did this for me. Oh man, you threw me a metal card, bro. What else you got? Like, because I have repeat customers because I throw bonus items in there. And
often I'll do like a bonus trading card that doesn't go out to anybody except for the past backers. So that's a nice thing, to keep rewarding your past customers.
Boy, but going back to the books, I'm assuming that, let's say a comic shop picks this up as a retail, wants it, and then funds, and then like, hey, we need more. I'm sure you're willing to sell them more.
Oh yeah. I always have, if they want to reach out to me, I always have a wholesale pricing for any retailer.
Because what people don't understand that I'm at, and this is why I bring this up in retail, is a lot of people say, I have a 50 book tier. I can't move 50 of the same book or several books. What I can do is that I want to test 10 or I want to test 15, because if those 15 move, I then will come back to you and we will try another 15. and then we will bump it up after the second round, 15 to 20, and then
Right.
those 20 move. I want to tier upward
Mm-hmm.
in certain ways where we go from 15 to 20 to 25 to 30, because there's going to be a point where 30 is going to be enough.
Yeah.
Every quarter or every 2 months, and then I'll
Mm-hmm.
buy another 30. And that's what sometimes people don't realize, is that maybe somebody can't buy 20 books from you or 50 books from you, but they could buy 15 and they want to test. And
Right.
that's where I'm at as a retailer, and that's why I bring this up, because I think it's a very important thing to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And on retail, and I think a lot of people in Kickstarter don't get this.
No, they try to mark it up so that it's like a higher tier, even though they're discounting it. It's that they're still trying to get that extra money.
I think people think that retail should be a higher tier, when in reality it should be a low. I mean, obviously, if you're selling 20 books to somebody, you can't charge $20 for it.
Right.
But you need to, I think, in retail, understand saying this is going to be resold in a store or an eBay store. And therefore, I need to figure out where my price is and where their price is and what they're going to be able to sell for and how they're going to be able to move it. Because the worst thing, I think, for any store is if a store picked up 10 of these books and they couldn't move them. That's a problem in reality.
Right.
It's a problem for you. It's a problem for the store. It's a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand. There's people's retail packages that I picked up that don't move. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why it's not moving. I mean, maybe it's not moving because what moves in my eBay store is not what their retail package is. Which
yeah, I mean, it all depends on what the retailers sell too. I mean, not every retailer is going to have the same interest.
Fair enough. But obviously, you have a bunch of other stuff too. I mean, you got the plushie, the physical book, the plushie, a physical copy, a digital copy. For those who want to read it digital, I'm presuming and potentially that you might release the digital straight up as a digital if this thing doesn't work. If somebody says, "Hey, I just want to read this Halloween," because the book's done, from my understanding, right?
Oh, it's 100% done.
So you could easily release this on Global Comics or somewhere else digitally, and it wouldn't cost you a penny to release it digitally.
Exactly.
$5.
Exactly.
And then obviously a physical copy can be achieved somewhere later on. But that's what's going on. But I do want to back up all of this. Also, you have the Omega member tier, you got the Alpha tier, the Kickstarter consulting stuff, the website stuff. All sorts of stuff is on here. And if there's something that somebody wants out of all of this and it's not there, I'm sure that you're extremely reach-outable.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's just it. You know, you could either reach out through the campaign or through my socials, email. Yeah, I'm very available.
Yeah. No. I would imagine you're very approachable. You're very approachable on all this. And believe me, there's weird requests that happen. I don't want to get into too much of that, but I've also heard people say, "Look, I want this, and this. Do you have that?" And I've had people develop custom tiers for people just based on that.
Oh yeah. I've done custom tiers for people before. I've worked out things. Matter of fact, somebody wanted a web tier, but didn't want all the swag. So they just basically backed for like a non-reward, but paid like $500 for like the simple website. So, I mean, I'm definitely like, if you have something you want to do, let me know. I'm open to it.
And so obviously, if there's something that you need or want, or you need something more, obviously Rob can probably arrange it for you regarding this.
Yeah, also, I mean, even if I don't have the books from the past Kickstarters, like the Nightwolf and Snowpaw on there now, I mean, if you want me to include them somehow, you and I can discuss something. There's bonus stuff we can figure out.
Because one of the things is that, and one of the things that I like to do is I like to combine shipping, right? Combining shipping is key.
Oh yeah,
on everything. And so I am well aware that anytime I could save my buyer $13 to $26 in shipping, guess what happens? They're extremely appreciative. Extremely appreciative.
Shipping is ridiculous anymore.
Oh, it's brutal. It's brutal. My favorite thing to do is I try to combine shipping on every single thing, and I try to upsell every customer saying, look, I can take off $5 here, but I'm going to take off $13 on the shipping. And usually on eBay, it works really nicely. So it's like, I'm saving $18. And I'm like, if you buy these two things separately, it's not going to work. If you want to buy this and not pay for it for a week, and you want to buy the other one too, or you want to buy both of them and not pay for them, that's fine too. I can wait a week, but I want to save you money shipping.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress. I do want to back out of your entire Kickstarter. I do want to talk about the health of the industry. So I think it's interesting because a lot of people are struggling on Kickstarter. A lot of people are taking L's. A lot of campaigns that should be doing better aren't doing well. And it's hard. I know plenty of people who are just crossing the finish line. Versus their funding. It's great that they're funding, but they ask for $5,000 and they get 5,100. That to me is problematic, because that to me is that if a year ago you asked for 4,500 and you got $6,000, and now you're asking for $5,000 and you got 5,100.
Yeah,
that's not a growing industry. That's problematic. And I know we were speaking before all this, economy is an issue, potentially burnout, potentially more products, better products. I think that there's better products outside of Kickstarter right now, outside of crowdfunding. And I'm
not
curious.
even just products, like you said, experiences, going to a game, going to a concert. That's all back again in full force, and not cheaper than it used to be. That'll tell you that.
You also think that the cons are now back in full swing too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the cons have been in full swing for a while. I think now though, people were like chopping at the bit to go to the cons when they first opened back up. So they were spending money. Now I think it's got to the point where they're like, okay, well, we've been going to these for the last couple of years. They keep raising the prices for admission. We're going to go spend our money and spend our day on a nice day doing something else.
I mean, I haven't been to a con in 4 years. I don't really think I can afford one. I really don't. I mean, I haven't paid for a con in a long time. I used to do panels at cons because they were expensive. And I'm not opposed to doing a panel at an anime con, because I enjoy talking about that. But I would rather go to an anime con than a Comic Con. I think Comic Cons are good malls.
Comic Cons have kind of like evolved into pop culture cons now.
I think they are a glorified mall and a glorified suck your money pit. Like, no, you laugh, but
I know exactly, because people will, like, for example, I remember a couple of years ago, Jason Momoa was at a con that I was at, and people were like, I remember somebody saying, "Oh, I love this, but I just spent $150 on Jason Momoa and I don't have any more money."
I mean, I was at a con in DC, and like a lot of people were there. It was expensive. And you know what? It gets a point where you're just like, this is brutal. It is pricey. It is pricey for a photograph of your celebrity. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that you pay $100 for a ticket, and then you have $1,000. And we'll use Awesome Con. $1,000 for me doesn't go that far at Awesome Con. Now, every dollar has a mission, because I never send my army in unprotected. But a lot of stuff was getting graded. A lot of merchandise was being graded. A lot of autographs on books were being calculated. And I looked at all the prices relative. I bought a commission for myself or somebody from Elias Chazudis that he did that got graded. But again, I left that con with $100 still in my wallet because the person that I wanted something from wasn't there. But I was extremely tactful in how I utilized my capital. But I understand where if it's $100 for a ticket, and then I got to take a significant other, and she is $100 for a ticket, that's $200. I mean, I don't not make a lot of money, but I don't make a lot of money. I have a comfortable lifestyle, but it gets complicated, because do I take care of my business, or do I have an experience? And it's so complicated. And then what happens when in a few years I'm going to have a kid, and then now that's going to make money even tighter. And so, like, me going to a con, I don't even know if it's viable.
I mean, that's just it. Like, for me, like, when I take my kids with us, like, we're like, to enjoy, that's a trip. That's an event. That's something, we have to plan ahead for. That's not just like, oh, we're going to go on a whim.
And so, I mean, this is where I get to the question: is it healthy? Because at this point, I find that a lot of money is being spent and or has been spent, and I think a lot of people are saying, "Look, I'm not enjoying the comics I'm reading. I'm not enjoying this, and I could go and spend $14 on Netflix and have 10,000 hours of content,
Mm-hmm.
and both good and bad, or I could spend $14 on your comic, and it might be a crapshoot." And then going to a con and then having that bucket. And this is why I have a lot of questions. Is the industry healthy? And, and,
I
and,
think if
and-
you've established yourself and you have returning fans, you will probably weather the storm for a while. I think new things will struggle for sure.
I mean, did you even feel though that if you've established yourself and you have returning fans, even still though, because returning, this is one of the things that I've had discussions with people about. Certain people are doing books every single month. I think you can kill your cow that way.
Yeah, I think quarterly is probably a good, healthy way, maybe less. I think
I
more.
can afford. I can afford. We'll use Tom as a good example because I don't think Tom's going to mind me using his name. If Tom did a book every 3 months, I could afford to spend $20 to $50 or even $80 every 3 months with Tom.
Mhm.
I can afford to spend $320 with Tom every year quarterly.
Mhm.
If he does that Marissa Pope mystery box for $80 or $75
Yeah.
every 3 months, no problem.
Yeah.
That is financeable. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. If he did one every month, I couldn't afford
Right.
it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think every quarter is healthy. More than that would probably be really stretching it.
Because I think what's going on right now and that's just one individual, but I think that it's not most people, like I said, don't back one individual. I mean, that's where this gets tricky, right?
Mhm.
Is you're not backing one individual at $20. You're backing three individuals at $20 or four or
Mhm.
five or
Right.
10. And then you wake up one day and you're like, fuck, where did my money go?
Well, exactly, because like I had mentioned before we started that, like right now, like in the last like 2 weeks, like there's so many great projects going on, and I want to be able to support all of them, and I'm like I have to be very choosy because otherwise I don't,
I
I
don't
won't
even
have the
know.
money.
So I don't even know what great projects are hiring. I mean, who right now has a project on Kickstarter? I mean, obviously Tom Hudson just did Video Game Day.
Mm,
That one just dropped. It looks okay. It looks okay. It's Big Dog Inc. It's a one-shot Video Game Day. It's a fun
yeah.
book. Looks interesting, but I don't know whose books are on Kickstarter right now.
Travis has another book, but here's the thing. Here's the caveat with Travis's. It's a unique idea.
It's a
It's
unique idea, but oh man, don't. I have a very very pessimistic view on that.
But my point to that is that it's not just his book. Then it's Russell Nolte's book. It's Frank Martin's book.
It's a problem.
Yeah,
It's a
it's like
problem.
it's 6 projects now that like because it's interchanging work, like interconnecting that like
Yeah,
you know
we should talk about that. All of them are going to hate me for saying it. That's a bad idea waiting to happen. I can explain why.
well
One of
for
those
me
books,
I would like to back them at physical, but I can't. I'm gonna back all 6 of them at a digital level because that's what I can afford.
I'm not even going to back all six right now. I'm going to back all six in a trade.
That's another reason why for me like I can do it digitally to read it now, and when the trade comes out I can get the book.
I'm gonna wait. I'm not even gonna back it digital. I'm gonna probably pick it up in a trade because I'm curious what they're doing. But I think it's a bad idea, and here's why I think it's a horrible idea. You have six projects from six different creators in a world. Each of those six creators has a different writing style, and they're all at different calibers.
Mhm.
One writer is better than the others statistically. I don't know who's the best writer out of the bunch, but out of the five or six of them, I don't know. So that means you're not getting the same quality of book from all six of them yet.
Well, that and they're not using the same art team too.
They're not using the same art team. It's a loose connected anthology. Somebody's gonna have to do $5,000. Somebody's gonna do 1,000 in that range, and then it's gonna all be in between. You're gonna have jealousy, infighting. You're gonna have measure ups. You're going to say, who's the leader on this project? And I saw the concept and I'm like, this is inviting more problems. And then you look at egos, and then you're going to look at a bunch of other stuff. And then what happens when somebody does, let's say somebody does 20,000 and somebody does 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen? And then also people are going to pick and choose. We're going to say, I could back this one and this one and this one, but I can't back the other three. And what am I missing? And then you're going to make people feel really bad about not being able to back all six.
And that's,
I know how the story ends. I know how it ends because I've seen it.
Again, that's why, like, for me, again, I'm going to back them all digitally because most of them are friends. I think one is, I don't know exactly where they are, but I'm going to still back all six at a digital level. And just, to support them. And again, I'm curious too to see how this experiment goes.
Oh, I think it's going to end badly. I think there's going to be a chem lab gone wrong. That's what I think. I like a good chunk of them too. This is not a personal stance on any of them. This to me is inviting more problems in than it's worth, because when you bring 6 people into a creative project, that is 3 chefs too many in the kitchen.
Well, it's not even that. It's just 6 creators. That it's, like I said, it's also art teams that, so you're bringing, it's basically like an anthology, as you said, but like on a totally different level.
I don't even think it's an anthology. I think it's just a shared universe. I wouldn't call it an anthology. I mean, I have a very pessimistic view on it, and I am very critical of this because I think this is going to end poorly. I don't think this is going to end the way these 6 think it's going to end. And I don't think it's going to, I think it's going to create a lot of problems. I think it's going to create a lot of ego. I think it's going to create bad blood. I really do. I think there's going to be a fracture with 1 or 2 of these people in this group because of this project. I would never, ever do a project or a business deal like this. Ever. This is like the cardinal rule of breaking every good decision in business. And I am very critical. And when I'm right, if people are going to refer back to this part and they'll be like, he called it. I'm telling you, I know how the story ends. I just know it. And I know somebody's going to kill it on this project statistically, and somebody's going to do 15 grand and somebody's going to do 2. And it's going to be a real issue of discrepancy, but I digress.
Yeah, no, it's, like I said, I'm curious to see how it goes, and you may be right, or it may be a complete success. Who knows? We'll see. But
I am critical. I will take the full responsibility. I will take the full responsibility.
But also on top of these projects, so these 6 projects, like there's Pat Shand has another one out.
Whoa, Pat has another one out now?
Yeah, he's got the second part of his Cthulhu funded his campaign.
Oh my God.
And then Tyler James just launched one today.
I don't know what Tyler James. I haven't seen a Tyler James project in a while.
He just he's relaunching Epic. So it's
I don't know that book. I had him on a while ago. I like him.
Epic was a book that he put out in the direct market and it hadn't been finished. So he just him and his co-creator just put it together, like the recent issue, and now he's like repackaging it for Kickstarter.
Well, I again, I have no idea what's out there right now. I mean, I know that Jamie Tyndall / Merck has something that's ending soon.
Yeah, don't they always though?
Yeah. They always do. They always do. Again, I've been spending time off Kickstarter. I've been spending a lot of time with like Mount Olympus and Zenoscope, and even just direct market, because direct market 24-hour sales is where I've been at. And like that's the thing. And then I've been spending time looking at Frankie's comics, which is completely liquidating themselves at 60 to 70% off. When you get a book that's $30, $35 for $10, I mean, as somebody who flips books, I mean, how can I say no? Right?
When Toys R Us liquidated and went out of business, we, like, my daughter had just been born, but we bought every single like girl toy that she could grow into for like the next 10 years.
For like Christmas is good for
Yeah,
a while.
that's what I'm saying. Like, we're like, okay, let's pull out. Let's see what age appropriate is this one. All right, we're good here. All right, we're good for her.
You get 2 toys this year. You've been extra good. Like in the middle, it's like the 4th of July. You're like, you know what? You get a toy. It's like
Birthdays and Christmases all paid for.
I should have cleaned out Toys R Us when they liquidated. I've made mistakes in my life. There's only been like 4 or 5 that I regret. I should have, when GameStop liquidated someplace, I should have cleaned them out in my mall that's near me. Oh man. What else was liquidated? There's been a bunch of stuff that's been liquidated that I should have cleaned out. But I did clean out Hot Topics liquidation, and I bought like all these Disney Pop Funkos that I made a little bit of money on. $3 that I turned into like 60. I was like,
oh, nice.
Good deal. I'm like just carrying it like this. Oh, it's great. But I digress. But obviously, I think we tackled the health of the industry. I am curious what you do think about Frankie's Comics, because that's kind of the big news of them having over $1 million worth of debt, and that's what I'm talking about on Friday, in a much more elite discussion. And then we're showing grace. I spoke to Kyle Willis about this, and I'm curious because not necessarily from a comic shop perspective, but even just from, I guess, a fan, and also what it kind of signals.
It's honestly like it's sad because like I want this industry to continue to grow and be there, especially for future generations. But I think between like the big companies not having, the stories that are going to keep people coming back in. I mean, I stopped buying, like I used to be my local, one of my local shops, best customers up until like 10 years ago. Then
do you feel, I mean, I don't know how much you know about the whole Frankie's thing that happened and why they went under.
I mean, I haven't been paying any attention, to be quite honest.
Frankie's is a very variant focused store.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot of money in debt because you have to buy 3,000 copies of a Marvel book to get a variant.
Oof.
So you got to pay for the artist. So let's say artist A is $800. It's approved, $800.
Yeah.
Then you got to pay for 3,000 copies. Now, if you're selling that book for $25, you're not paying $25 per book. But let's say that you're paying, I don't know, $1.50 for a variant, right? Yeah. I don't know what the number is. So let's say you're paying $4,000, right? So you have to spend $4,800 to get a variant. And then I don't know if you have to pay for printing, and I don't know if that includes a license fee. And let's say it's a license fee of another brand. So you got to spend 6 G's to get 3,000 books. Now, if you're selling them for $25 a pop and you sell 2,500 of those, you're clear as a Stark. Right. Delivering a baby, right? Because that's 12.5, I think, is the number, if I'm not mistaken. But the real question is that what happens when that stuff doesn't move? But what happens when you're dealing with that? Instead of dealing with 1, you're dealing with 30 a month.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's just it. Like, when you're buying variants from like, Marvel or DC, like, again, it also depends on the book. It depends on like whether it's a number 1 or if it's like later on in a series, or if the series itself is just bad.
Cover artist.
Yeah.
Cover artist. If Dawn Matei does a cover on Spider-Man 25, nobody gives a damn about Spider-Man 25. They care that she did a cover.
Right. But that's the problem then is like, then you got the regular people who aren't buying. Like, so you have like the cover people who are like, oh, well, this is going to be worth something because of the artist. Well, but then if the book itself is crap and nobody's buying it, then you have all that surplus sitting, so it's a bad business model. Again, I think it goes back
it's a good business model if you leverage it correctly.
Well, that's just it though. Like, but you said even like if there's 30 titles and you're ordering that much, you have to be more choosy about which titles you're doing that with.
you either need to be choosy, you need to have a lot of money in the game,
Or have a
so
lot of people with box subscriptions that they're putting in their monthlies.
you need to have mystery boxes that
Mm-hmm.
are really good. There's a lot of ways you can move this, or you need comic partners, which is what Frankie's had with places like Comics Mint. So let's say that you have 4 other shops and you're breaking up a 3,000 print run between 4 shops and you're each dividing it 900 a piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, Comics Mint is paying you $10, or they're paying you cost to produce the book plus a cost of art. So they're paying $7 a book.
Right.
All of a sudden, that's how you can cover 30 titles a month in variant work. But unfortunately, if you don't sell things and they don't move, there you go. I mean, you run into that problem. And this is where I mean, my opinion is that I am very upset by what happened to Frankie's. I think it's a problem. It's a signal to me to diversify my merch. There's a reason why in my eBay store, and I think this is what people in Kickstarter need to really pay attention to, is you need to diversify your merch. So right now, trading cards are really hot. Maybe producing 3 trading cards and putting that as an $8 tier on your campaign isn't such a bad idea. Or having 2 bonus trading cards, because maybe somebody doesn't want to buy your comic, but they want your trading card.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I bought people's trading cards off of their campaign. Like, I didn't want to read Pat Chan's like smoke weed book, that like future smoke weed gangster, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really or appreciate me, or it was like his UFC book, but I wanted the cards for Destiny New York.
Right.
So $6 or $8, I bought the cards.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go spend the money and spend $25 because I wanted 2 cards. But he put the cards up for $8. And Pat understands that some people say, look, I'm a card collector. I like your product and I like your trading cards. So if you give it to me for $10, that's what I want on your campaign.
Right.
And that's what I think people have to understand, is that you have to diversify your merch stream. And that's what I think the Frankie's Comics thing has taught me. And I was doing it before they went bankrupt. And now I'm doing it a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's just that you can't lay all your eggs in one basket.
So that's just how I feel. But maybe I'm a unique breed. I don't know. But it is what it is. I mean that's just how I feel. But again, we're talking about it on Friday. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. I'm reaching out to some people. It's going to be like an hour and a half, and it's going to be a very in-depth adult conversation about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important. I think it's a very important discussion. I did it last month with what's working in comics, and it's my monthly thing now. Is we have adult discussions about problems in comics, and we all come from different I digress. That has nothing to do with Nightwolf or the Wolf Pack or Wolf Pups, which are so cute and adorable. Absolutely. And so obviously that's where I am. And then I do want to give you a chance to promote yourself, because we've been speaking for a while and my voice is getting sore.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you want to pull up the campaign and we'll talk about it, or you just want me to go ahead and talk off the cuff?
You could go right. I already spoke about your campaign. I have the link in the description that everybody can go back it.
There you go. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a professional.
Yeah.
We've been speaking about your campaign at the start of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Nobody watches it to the end anyway.
Fair enough. So yeah, if you go to wolfpackpups.com/Halloween, that'll take you directly to the Kickstarter page, that really long URL. And so if you know anybody who has kids, or if you have kids, or if you have grandkids, this is a great book to read with them. It teaches them about not being jealous and being able to play with others and having fun no matter what the situation is. You can, whether it's a preschool, the park, or whatever, you can, be friends with everybody and have fun. And, don't steal other kids' friends and turn them into plushies. But yeah, no, this is, again, it's about 2 young werewolf pups who, are going out trick-or-treating because they can go out in their werewolf form without scaring anybody. And then they run into 2 of their monster grade school classmates who happen to be 2 twin witches. And they some magical chaos ensues, and you have to see what happens by getting the book.
And then obviously I put the link in the description above. And then also, where can people find you? Because you don't just do this book. You do obviously Snowball, you do Nightwolf, you got some other stuff going on. You do some graphic design, you do some web design, you do some other stuff as well. I'm sure you're open to other work if somebody approached you with something.
That's right. Diversify.
Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah.
Obviously, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the fun stuff.
You can find my comics at Lone Wolf Comics on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rob Multari. And Wolfpack Pups. You can on Facebook is the Wolfpack Pups, and on Twitter I believe is the Wolfpack Pups, and on Instagram is WPPUPS because I couldn't get all the same names.
And then I've been saying it for a while, and I'm going to keep saying it. You have to support indie. And what that means is you have to go back Kickstarters when they're live. You have to also share out Kickstarters when they're live. You have to post it on Facebook, X, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever else, TikTok, wherever else is the cool place to go. You got to talk about it, tell a friend, call a friend. I don't know what we do anymore. Tweet it out, Snapchat it. WhatsApp it, all the fun stuff. Just send it to somebody.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to back the campaign, but there's a kid out there who wants his book, so share it with whoever their parent is or grandparent.
Also, if you're local in a comic shop,
that's true.
One of the things, and the comic shop is kid friendly. Mentioning it to a kid friendly comic shop.
Kids are the future of the industry. If they aren't reading, then there will be no books in the future.
And also, you know what is? It's a potential good deal for the comic shop as well. And that's the other thing too, is you making sure your comic shop is healthy. I mean, a comic shop that sells books that could have a 40% profitability is a very good position, because most comics don't do that. And that's something to keep in the back of your head. So obviously that's something to look out for. And you never know. It could very well be that a comic shop is very open. They're like, let me look at that. You could just walk in and say, hey, how are you doing, man? This thing came off. I think it would be good. And you pull it up, it pulls it up on the guy's computer, and he could decide. So there you go. That's a big thing. And then obviously that's everything that I think is really important for you. And then for me, obviously social media, I am Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, X, Pop Anime Comics on Facebook, Pop Anime Comics on Instagram, Pop Anime Comics on YouTube. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, please do so. It makes a huge difference to me, and it's really important, and I really appreciate it. So please go do that. And then I'm Pop Anime Comics on TikTok. And yeah, I just got a lot of content. I have 1,100 videos, guys, up on YouTube. And I really appreciate when people watch it. There is an interview for you on my YouTube channel. And I cannot promise that you will get smarter, but I will assure you that you will be entertained when you watch a bunch of stuff on my YouTube channel. So go check it out. And that's everything I got. And I'm going to give you the final word.
Yeah. Like I said, go check out Wolfpack Pups at wolfpackpups.com/Halloween.
Well, I don't think I could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is a